Hey everybody, this is Debbie. I'm back for another edition of Ask Ron. I'm here with Nelson today. He's filling in for Ron this week, so we're happy to have him back. Okay, Nelson, we've got a few questions here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Our first question is from Tracy. Tracy's from Pennsylvania, and the question is regarding high-end homes. I've heard you speak about these homes briefly, about earning a larger profit margin. Other than end buyers and companies seeking these homes for executives transferring to an area for a year or two, for example, what other exit strategies are there? I'm not interested in being in the business of renting these houses, even though I just read an interesting article saying that some of these homes are being rented versus bought due to depreciation. I'm about 45 minutes west of Philadelphia in a very nice, desirable area. I'm more specifically referring to houses from the $500,000 to $1 million or $2 million range. As I was driving for dollars, I saw one of these Fisbell homes, but haven't approached them yet.
All right, Tracy, this is a good one that's working extremely well in today's economy. We call this the Pax Program. Basically, it's people that have a house where the mortgage value excuse me, is higher than the market value. And we refer to this as upside down. If you think about it, the seller's very motivated, but they can't sell it. Again, because they owe more than they're worth. So the Pax Program works when we contact the seller and say the only way I could probably help you is to get a 10-year lease that gives the house a chance to appreciate to the hopefully market value at that time. The payments will be identical to the mortgage payments, and it will stay that way for 10 years unless the bank goes up on the payment because of real estate or taxes and insurance, and then that would make the payment go up. But the tenant buyer will understand that in advance. The good thing about this is working extremely well as long as we get the owner, the seller, to understand that they won't make any money on the tail end or monthly with the payments. This is designed just to satisfy their needs of being able to make payments to help them not go into a foreclosure. And basically it works like this. I get paperwork done with the seller, the owner, and tell them what I just mentioned. I will find a tenant buyer to put in their house with their permission. They will usually ask, how much is this going to cost me? And I will tell them nothing. The tenant buyer will pay for my fees. Also, the tenant buyer will pay the attorney fees. So there's no out-of-pocket expenses at all to the owner of the property. And if they agree to that, I do the necessary paperwork and then I start marketing for a tenant buyer. And basically I want a tenant buyer, and they're interested in this because they don't have to have a large down payment. All they're agreeing is to lease the house for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they can walk away. It's not mandatory that they buy it. In fact, they could probably cancel a lease at almost any time by just giving a 30-day notice with the seller and they move. In that case, the seller might call and say, hey, they've moved. I said, you want me to find you another tenant buyer? And I go through the process all over again. And like I say, this has become very, very popular because the owner of the property maintains ownership. That owner will usually say, I understand the purchase price being the mortgage balance, but how about every month when a payment's made, my principal is reduced? I will say, yes, absolutely right. That principal reduction also goes to the tenant buyer. Sometimes they have a hard time understanding that. So I explain it like this. We'll call the seller Bob. Bob, when you make the payments with your money, the principal reduction goes to you. When the tenant buyer sends their check to you to make the payment, it's their money making the payment. So the principal reduction goes to the tenant buyer. So like I say, this is a new one Ron just came up with. It's working extremely well. And I think it'll work in this case, Tracy. The only thing is, if you want to do houses 500, a million, 2 million, it works. You just have to make sure that the mortgage payment is what a tenant buyer is willing to pay or able to pay. So that's the main thing with high-end houses. It can be very profitable, providing that it's done correctly.
Okay, great. I think too, Nelson, we have a question from Debbie Makar regarding the down payment for the tenant buyer. I think that you pretty much answered this, but I'll go ahead and read it anyway, and you can clarify if not. When you take a deposit for tenant buyer, is that the only money that is applied to balance when they decide to buy? Each month when they pay the monthly payment, none of that goes toward paying down the balance?
Okay, let me explain that in more detail than just yes, yes. This is different than the AX program because this way they are either rent to own or lease optioning a house because they don't have the credit to buy it right now. In that case, we'll pretend the house is $100,000 to keep the arithmetic simple. I would advertise to rent to own lease option. I want 5% non-refundable binder, which would be $5,000. And the reason I need that is because when they clean up their credit and go to the bank, they will need 5% down payment that's going to be required by the bank. Now, make sure they understand, and even our attorney's office, that is not a security deposit. It's a non-refundable binder, not given back for any reason whatsoever. And on this type of deal, it works extremely well because we're satisfying a problem. It's either property that I already own and want to rent to own lease option, or we've tied it up with somebody else who's given us permission to do that for them.
Okay. All right, our last question today is from Dave DeWert from Indiana, and Dave's question refers to the AX Real Property Possession and Lease Agreement. Dave says, I need a little help filling in the updated agreement. As I understand, the seller needs to sign this to allow me to start marketing for a new tenant buyer. Once I locate a new tenant, then my lawyer can do all the paperwork to get it closed. Is that right?
Yes. Now, David, we explained earlier what the AX program does, but the paperwork is up to you, and that's in the courses and the training that Ron has purchased. There's only 3 entities that can sell property. The owner of the property, a realtor because they've got a license, and us as investors, providing we have the right paperwork signed by the owner of the property, giving us permission to offer a service for them. Now on this one right here, it would be a little bit different than the other one, but you would ask about the agreement. The seller needs to sign and allow me to start marketing a new tenant. That is correct. Once I locate a tenant, my lawyer dropped the paperwork. That is also correct. But you have to give them instructions on what to do. And that paperwork is in the course, step by step. Just follow the examples.
Okay, great. Well, Nelson, that's all we have today, and we thank you for being with us again. So we'll see everybody on the next Ask Ron.
Thank you.